I wanted to talk to you because there's some foolishness taking place right now in the American electorate. You and I were featured in this story in the Washington Post. It was really your story. I just was commenting on it because I think you're smart in this stuff. You were all over it. Helena Andrews, our friend Helena Andrews Dyer from the Washington Post, did a piece about Kanye West and what impact, how much attention we should be paying to Kanye West. So I just want to hear from you. I mean, you've been looking at Donald Trump and black male voters. You're paying attention to what's happening with millennial voters, all kinds of voters. I mean, should we be worried about Kanye?
Look, Jamal, I'm not thrilled about having to spend, my political hours on the clock here talking about Kanye West, but I understand that he is a threat that cannot be ignored. I've been, since the beginning of this election cycle, I've referred to black men as the real swing voters. Black men will determine the outcome of this election. And the truth is, Joe Biden has quite a bit of work to do amongst black men, and Kanye West is appealing to quite a few black men. And what I impressed upon Helena, and what I keep impressing every time Kanye comes up, is that Kanye West does not have to become president to determine who the next president is.
Yeah.
He doesn't even need millions of votes to determine who the next president is. Just a couple thousand votes in Michigan, a couple thousand votes in Wisconsin, and he could determine the outcome of this election.
I mean, Michigan's an interesting case, right? Because in 2016, Donald Trump won Michigan by about 10 or 11,000 votes, right? What we saw in the city of Detroit in particular was a 50,000 vote drop off from 2012 to 2016. So not having those people show up mattered in Michigan in a way that really could have swung the state. So you think if Kanye can peel off some number of voters away from Joe Biden, or that he can make a difference?
Absolutely. I mean, not only did 50,000 people in Detroit not show up, about 38,000 people voted third party in Michigan, right? Hillary Clinton only lost by 11,000 votes.
Right.
Kanye West can sell more than 11,000 tickets in Detroit today, right now, right? These are things that we have to be worried about. I mean, and the truth is, Kanye's political message is that nobody is delivering for black people. His whole message is that we are being herded by Democrats, we're being ignored by Republicans. And the truth is, Jamal, that is a message I hear in focus groups from men of color around the country. Sometimes when I hear Kanye speak, I wonder if he is repeating what he's hearing from young voters, or if young voters are repeating what they're hearing from Kanye West.
Yeah, I've heard something similar like this from people for years. People have wondered, and it's true. A lot of them are black men. I mean, you and I both went to Morehouse. I don't know how many days you spent standing around on the yard arguing about politics or public issues. And somebody always says something like this, right? Like, Democrats don't care about us, But it seems like in the last few years, the margins have gotten so narrow on these elections that it could matter. Who are these black male voters in particular that we're worried about?
Yeah, so in a recent poll that we just conducted, Black Track, which is a monthly reoccurring poll of black voters, we found that 60% of black men under the age of 50 believe that Democrats take black votes for granted. We found that 46% of black millennials under the age of 35 disapprove of Democrats. There is a very cynical voter here. And the truth is, this is just a poll of black voters, but in previous polls of young voters of all colors, we find very similar cynicism. So the challenge and the threat that Kanye has as a third-party candidate, and it would be a threat of almost any third-party candidate right now, is not just a threat amongst young black voters, it's a threat amongst young people who are overwhelmingly rejecting both political parties, who overwhelmingly identify as independent, and whose independence in itself is a political affiliation.
Yeah, and in fact, they take pride in being independent, right? Not being affiliated with brands. And actually, what's interesting is it's not just in politics. Like, we're seeing this across the board, whether it's religion. People don't want to necessarily wear a brand on their T-shirt, even if they're wearing the brand and the label, right? They're not going to try to broadcast that to everybody. So we're seeing this affiliation from being identified, or this affection from being identified. But do you think that this year, are white suburban women really going to be the ones that make the difference more than young black males?
I mean, the truth is, white suburban women have, in many ways, fallen back into the progressive coalition, where Hillary Clinton lost white women in general by 2 points. Joe Biden is now leading amongst white women by almost 20 points. So, in so many ways, white women, uh, by the shock and awe of to the 2016 election, starting from the Women's March during the inauguration, have been taking strides towards the progressive coalition. In the inverse, though, young people are identifying less and less as Democrats, and they're beginning to splinter. And I'm afraid that any third party candidate could pose a threat, especially one with the platform of millions of people, especially one who every time he speaks, he is covered by every single media outlet, including the Washington Post, the New York Times, and political pundits like us here today.
Okay, so here's what I said to Helena when we talked to her. What I was worried about isn't that there was going to be some great big movement to Kanye West, but that Kanye, if his message is kind of the message you were just talking about, a pox on both their houses, you know, Republicans don't want you, Democrats take you for granted, they're all a mess, they're all corrupt. That actually is a Trump-friendly message, because what Trump wants is for people to think it's a mess, it doesn't matter, I can't make a difference. And if you get enough people who believe that, they don't show up at all, and then that gives him a wider path to try to eke out a narrow victory.
That's exactly right. I mean, we know that Donald Trump's strategy in this election cycle is not to win a majority of votes. It is to make sure that we win less votes than he does, right? And so when he starts these campaigns towards men of color, where he is targeting them with digital ads that say, your Democratic mayor has failed you, and that's why President Donald Trump signed the First Step Act. When he puts $10 million behind a Super Bowl commercial of a black woman saying, I was released from prison because of President Trump, he is targeting a very specific voter. And he's not trying to win the majority of black men. He's trying to shave off enough of the margins that they start to grow less and less favorable towards Democrats. And that's why I don't just look at, in our polling, I don't just look at the horse race and who would you vote for if the choice was Joe Biden or Donald Trump. Because frankly, if you ask voters, if you ask someone what would they choose between hamburgers and hot dogs, and they hated both hamburgers and hot dogs, they're still going to make a choice, right? When it's a forced choice, you make a choice. So I'm looking at favorability. Who do they like? And when Donald Trump hits a 33% favorability amongst black men in Wisconsin,
wow,
which is the same favorability as college-educated white women in Wisconsin, then he's winning the margins game. He's picking off enough.
So you guys launched this Black Track in the last few weeks, couple months. What are you seeing? What is Black Track, and what are you finding?
So Black Track is a monthly poll of African American voters, 1,000 African American voters nationally, and the truth is that public opinion is shifting rapidly in these volatile times. It's shifting around things like COVID, around policing, but also around very, very pivotal issues like vote by mail. And so Black Track is a way to monitor those shifts in public opinion, monitor how black voters are responding to these volatile times, so that folks can make more informed decisions.
So other than the scary 33% favorability you found among black men in Wisconsin, what else have you found that makes your ears perk up?
So a couple of things. One is, black voters are absolutely beginning to look for alternative ways to vote this cycle, being overwhelmingly impacted by COVID, with 32% of black voters saying that they know someone that has been infected by COVID. That it is affecting our community in a unique way. And it's also making us look for safer alternatives, where there was once a high reluctance and high cynicism towards things like vote by mail. You now have 58% of black voters saying that they prefer to vote by mail in November. So A lot of the progressive coalition has been moving towards expanding access to vote by mail, but we got to make sure we have both. It's a both and approach here, and that folks still can go and get in line and vote early if they want to.
Do you find people who are scared and think they may not vote at all? Is that number, or anybody who's nervous, you think, saying that they just won't participate this year?
You do have 19% of voters saying that if COVID does, 19% of Black voters saying that if there's not progress on COVID, then they would be reluctant to vote. That is a scary number.
That's a scary number.
That's a scary number.
And these are registered voters, all likely voters?
They're all registered voters, a mix of frequent and infrequent voters, but all registered and all have voted since 2008.
Wow. All right. Well, unless you got something, you have any good news you want to share with us before we take off?
I do.
Give me good news before we go. I want to feel better.
The good news is, there's one question that we've been asking on polls for years now, and that's what's one word that you would use to describe your feelings towards the upcoming election? And leading up until now, for the past 3 or 4 months, we've been asking this question. Morale has been extremely low. The majority of Black voters have felt either anxious, nervous, or afraid. And since the protests following George Floyd's death, we have seen a tremendous shift where 41% of Black voters now feel hopeful about the outcome of the November election. So there's an optimism, there's a growing morale, and I think Democrats and Joe Biden and all Democratic candidates have an opportunity to harness that energy and harness the passion that we saw in those protests and turn it into political power in November.
All right. Hope is back.
Hope is back. Hope is back on the ballot.
All right, Terrance. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Jamal. Be back anytime.
Talk to you later.